Mr. Granoff, thank you very much for your time. How did you see the conference in general?
Well, it's good that people come together to talk about nuclear disarmament. And many of the ambassadors here have laid out what appears to be a consensus agenda of strengthening the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, a positive attitude at the regeneration of progress between Russia and the United States on the disarmament agenda, and a more hopeful attitude toward the prospects of nuclear disarmament. I thought that the statement that was read early this morning from Ayatollah Khamenei to the effect that nuclear weapons are haram goes very nicely with the President of the United States saying that he's committed to seeking the security of a world without nuclear weapons, and that the United States has a moral responsibility to do that because of our use of an atomic bomb in World War II.
The Iranian government considers this as a direct threat. Comments made by President Obama excluding Iran and North Korea on countries that would not be attacked by nuclear weapons. How do you analyze that?
It's a distortion of what President Obama said. President Obama said that negative security assurances would not be extended to countries that are not in compliance with their nuclear non-proliferation treaty obligations. That's not the same as a threat.
And do you think that this would be just that countries such as the United States, Russia, France, and Britain, who are possessing a huge number of nuclear warheads, they are the ones that are at the moment updating their nuclear arsenal? Of course, they are eradicating the old ones, but there are here and there talks about the new generation of nuclear weapons. Do you think that these countries should be in a position to decide for countries who do not have these weapons over their nuclear activities, such as the nuclear activity of Iran over its nuclear energy program?
Iran has a right to nuclear energy. Every citizen on the planet has a duty to make sure that no more countries and no more people get nuclear weapons, and has a right to demand from the nuclear weapon states, the countries that have them, India, Pakistan, Israel, North Korea, and the P5, the UK, China, Russia, France, and the United States, to get rid of their nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons cannot be used against another country that has them. That would be suicidal. It's patently immoral to use them against a country that doesn't have them, and they're of no value against terrorists. Moreover, amongst the countries that have them, none of us are existential enemies. My country's economy is dependent on China. Russia and the United States truly want to normalize. So why do we still have this legacy of history? It's time, very much, it's time to move on.
And how possible do you see this movement that you earlier mentioned in action rather than words? Because every country, when it comes to the issue of disarmament and non-proliferation, brings up an excuse not to do it. Everybody's having a very sweet talk about it, but nobody's taking any serious action about it. For example, I was talking to a gentleman from the Pakistani Foreign Ministry. The reason for Pakistan to have a nuclear weapon was the nuclearization of India.
There's a lot of positive steps being taken. I think we're going to see the negotiations of a cutoff on the production of fissile material. We already see the lowered posture of the status of nuclear weapons in the U.S. Nuclear Posture Review. You only picked out one aspect of it. The credible elites within nuclear weapon states, particularly in the United States, people like Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, William Perry, former Secretary of Defense, these kinds of people are coming out and saying, we must seek a world without nuclear weapons. This is a sea change. And to have the President of the United States and the President of Russia state clearly that they're going to pursue nuclear disarmament, the political space has now been opened up. And rather than be cynical about it, we should move forward and support it. I was in India last year, and the Prime Minister of India said that India would support a convention dealing with nuclear weapons like the Chemical Weapons Convention, universally, legally, and verifiably banning them. China has similarly taken that position. It's my hope that many countries will begin a preparatory process on a convention to universally, legally, and enforceably ban nuclear weapons. It will take work, it will take time, but as we move in that direction, the political currency of these terrible devices will diminish. In answer to your question about whether nuclear weapon states can effectively stop proliferation, nuclear weapon states can only effectively stop proliferation if they make credible progress in disarmament. I have children. Do you think that I could convince my children not to smoke cigarettes if I had a cigar in my mouth?
So, do you think? So, what you're saying is that there should be a very serious step in order to try to convince these countries to gather together and take this step very seriously once and for all. Is this going to happen or not?
Well, it's a process that has begun, and I think the START process was a first step in that regard. It's just the first step. But I don't think that countries that don't have nuclear weapons would, if a country in this region, another country, got nuclear weapons and there was a cascade of proliferation, would the region be more secure? Of course not. Were they of any value to the United States in the war in Vietnam? Absolutely not. Were they of any value to Russia when Russia was at war in Afghanistan? Absolutely not. Nuclear weapons are not of military value. They are a psychological tool of terror, and it's from a bygone era. Remember, the first proliferator was Nazi Germany, and the United States developed the Manhattan Project in response to that. And then the Soviet Union followed suit, and then we had 80,000 nuclear weapons. We now have to reverse that course. The Cold War is over. The Cold War is over. The walls of fear between peoples and countries that are generated by passionate rhetoric that plays to domestic constituencies has to be diminished, and the bridges of trust have to be created. There's absolutely no real reason why the people of the United States and the people of Iran shouldn't be fully normalized. It's time now to begin talks without preconditions, very much quiet talks, in which the United States and Iran listen to each other and respond seriously to their mutual concerns. It's time now for Iran to give security assurances to all countries in the region and not make threatening remarks that create fear in Israel. It's time that the people of Palestine were in an environment where there was security and a cohesive, productive state for the Palestinian people could be created. It's time now to realize that with our BlackBerries, we as citizens now have access to the kind of information that only the most sophisticated intelligence services had 30 years ago. A normal citizen today can find out almost anything in the world and talk to anybody in the world. Who could have imagined that 30 years ago? And for the people in Iran, what strikes me as very amazing is, and you couldn't have ever imagined this 30 years ago, the most popular poet in Iran is Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. One of the most popular poets in America is Rumi. Now, 30 years ago, could you have imagined that? It's totally amazing. I think we can expect amazing changes. Who could have predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall? Who could have predicted the end of apartheid without a bloodbath? Who could have predicted BlackBerries and the internet? We know that the unexpected will happen, and people of good faith should plan for success. Plan on the principles of success. Build the bridges of trust, and Iran can do a lot in that regard, and so can the United States. First step is ratify the Test Ban Treaty. You know, there's no reason for Iran not to ratify the Test Ban Treaty. It has no aspirations for nuclear weapons, and it will put pressure on the United States to do the right thing. It will help people like me who are pushing my country to ratify the Test Ban Treaty. And the president of my country wants to ratify the Test Ban Treaty, forever banning any further testing of nuclear weapons. It's so basic. So these are little steps, but the little steps gain momentum. And as they gain momentum, we will move toward a world without nuclear weapons. It's inevitable.
Mr. Granoff, pointing to the issue of Iran, why do you think, despite the fact that Iranian officials, especially in the IAEA, have tried all ways to guarantee to the agency and to the international community that the nature of their nuclear activities are peaceful? Still, there is a huge amount of pressure on Iran, despite the fact that the agency has not yet been able to find a single bit of evidence that Iran has deviated from its peaceful nature of its activities.
Well, if Iran were to adopt the additional protocols to the inspection regime and then work to create a model monitoring and inspection regime, it would serve a great service to the rest of the world. Iran started with a credibility deficit because for over a decade it was not forthcoming with its nuclear program. So you had this history here, and then you also had very aggressive language toward the United States and toward other countries in the region. With that history, there was a hurdle to overcome. It hasn't been overcome. And it's not just the United States. The international community, by virtue of the sanctions that the Security Council has imposed, has evidenced a lack of confidence. But I think Iran could overcome that by not just the additional protocols, but doing more than that and being an example of what we'd like to see everywhere.
But Iran is not the only country which is opposed to the additional protocol. There are other countries, such as Brazil, who are also in opposition to this issue. They consider this as a breach of their sovereignty.
Well, Brazil was one of the countries that created the Treaty of Tlatelolco, creating a nuclear weapons-free zone in Latin America with its own safeguard regime. So people have total confidence that Brazil does not have a nuclear weapons aspiration. That confidence does not exist in this region. One of the reasons is that Israel has nuclear weapons. And so other countries in the region say this is an inequity. And so there's political pressure to say the way we'll deal with this inequity is we'll get nuclear weapons. And then everybody suffers enormously. There isn't that political pressure in Latin America. The solution to the dilemma is a universal ban on nuclear weapons.
Thank you very much for your time.
Is this useful?